The family of the North Carolina man who was shot dead by police has now seen the video of his death following several nights of protests in reaction to the incident. Keith Scott was killed by a police officer as part of a search for another man. The family's attorney says the videos do not clearly show if Scott was holding a gun. Police insist the 43-year-old black man was carrying a firearm and ignored repeated orders to drop it. His family say he was an innocent man sitting quietly in his car when he was killed. Well, Tetiana Anderson is in Charlotte with the latest developments on this story. Tetiana, we're seeing pictures here of nights that have followed of this continued violence. The curfew was set to kick in around midnight your time, which is just over 2 minutes ago. How's that looking so far?
Well, as you can see, protesters are on the streets just behind me. They're actually hurling bottles of water in our direction. But up to this point, protests have been largely peaceful. At this hour, police not reporting any injuries to civilians or to officers. But as you can see, protesters definitely on the streets. And earlier in the evening, they did attempt to block a stretch of Interstate 277. Police in riot gear worked to break that up. One person told me that they also used tear gas in order to make that happen. This is the third day of protests here in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, following that shooting death of Keith Lamont Scott. And there's been a lot going on here. We're also learning on Thursday that that protester who was shot on Wednesday has died. This is something that the presidential candidates are weighing in about. Hillary Clinton reaching out to the city's mayor and Donald Trump reaching out to the state's governor. This is the message that people have here on the streets. They're very intent on getting that across. All of this happening, though, as state officials are working to get to the bottom of what happened.
At the center of the investigation into the death of Keith Scott, the question of whether or not he was carrying a gun at the time and if he pointed it at police. Family members are demanding that police release the video from the incident that's already been studied by investigators.
Ultimately, what I think the whole community here wants is the truth. And to the extent that release of the video can somehow help us reach that truth, I think that the family will ultimately support its release.
Scott's family says he was carrying a book when he was shot, not a gun. They say he posed no threat. Charlotte Police Chief Kerr Putney says the family is being allowed to watch the video, but he says he has no intention of releasing it to the general public. A new North Carolina law that goes into effect next month withholds police dash cam and body cam video from public record. Conflicting stories of the fatal shooting have led to consecutive nights of rioting in Charlotte, forcing North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory to declare a state of emergency in the state's largest city. National Guardsmen and highway patrol officers are working alongside the Charlotte police force. The governor says they will remain until normalcy is restored.
The National Guard has been mobilized. General Lusk has done an outstanding job during the past 24 hours in bringing members of the Guard to Charlotte.
The shooting death is now being investigated by the State Bureau of Investigation, following a request by the Scott family. Investigators are also determining whether charges should be brought against the police officer who fired the fatal shots. For now, the city of nearly 1 million people remains on edge and is the latest to add to a grim statistic of another black man killed by police.
And as for that video, a lawyer for the Scott family says that they had the opportunity to watch 2 of those videos. And after seeing those videos, they have more questions than answers. They say that Scott was calm. They say he was not aggressive. They say that he had his hands by his side and he was slowly walking backwards when he was shot. And you can see that protesters are still here on the street. You mentioned that curfew earlier. We'll have to wait and see if they adhere to it. But right now, Natasha, that's just not happening.
It appears that way. Tetiana Anderson, we will be crossing to you throughout the evening to see if that curfew actually does work. Thank you. Tetiana Anderson in North Carolina, Charlotte.